Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Silver Years. My name is DK, and I'm very happy to be here, and I humbly thank you for joining me. Today, I'd like to talk about aliens, and I'm not talking about aliens of the illegal variety. You know, those who move away from the country of their birth and choose to reside in a foreign country without going through the established legal channels, something we hear a lot about these days with ICE enforcement and all. No, not that. I'm talking about aliens of the not from this planet variety. Many call them extraterrestrials, and it would include those beings not born on this planet. And yes, the label alien can create quite a bit of confusion here, in my opinion, because it can clearly have multiple meanings. Because of this, I'll not refer to extraterrestrials as being aliens or ETs going forward, but more likely as galactic or non human beings. With the recent creation of a new whitehouse.gov website titled Aliens.gov, it seems the discussion about are we alone in the universe is finally going mainstream. So mainstream that even Fox News is now talking about it, which has many weighing in on the implications. I wondered for a very long time if I'd ever see the day when the mainstream media would publicly announce, to those who still actually watch and believe the news, that the existence of non human beings is a real thing as opposed to a conspiracy theory. And not only did Fox News validate it publicly as a thing, they even provided images of four different species for our consideration. Those species shown were listed as grays, Nordics, insectoids, and reptilians. And it's my understanding they're claiming to know of these four species because beings matching these descriptions have been pulled from downed spacecraft. Some in the UFO community would likely call this Fox News report a soft disclosure, which basically means a monitored and controlled introduction for everyday people to the reality that other alien, non human species do exist. And naturally, along with this awareness would come the knowledge of how these beings travel, how they get around the universe, because they had to get here somehow if they're being spotted and reported by human observers, and if their spacecraft are being shot down. And what was always called a UFO, unidentified flying object, has now been officially expanded to a UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon. While I find this soft disclosure to be more positive than negative overall, because the disclosure was always inevitable, it begs the question why? Why now? After a century of secrets and cover ups, and the swift termination or disappearance of any whistleblower who dared to speak out, why is the government allowing this to go mainstream now? So mainstream that the government has even created its own website to control the dissemination of disclosure information as it sees fit. All this after it's made it a point to cover up and hide anything UFO, UAP, or alien for as long as I can remember, such as when the World War II pilots began reporting aerial attacks by what they called UFO Foo Fighters. Then there was the Battle of Los Angeles over Long Beach Harbor in 1942 that was dismissed as a weather balloon event. The infamous Roswell, New Mexico crash in 1947, where gray beings were known to be retrieved from the downed spacecraft, was also dismissed as a weather balloon event. It seems, in fact, the Roswell, New Mexico incident was where the government made a decisive move to completely hide the presence of off planet beings from our scope of reality with the formation of a secret committee called Majestic 12, or MJ12 for short. All Things Alien was the focus of MJ12, and its members had a security clearance above the president. Think the movie Men in Black. When Defense Secretary James Forrestal, one of the original members of MJ12, formed under Harry S. Truman, expressed concern over the truth being hidden from the people, he experienced an untimely demise under suspicious circumstances. The official narratives are about as real as the weather balloons that keep showing up whenever a UFO or UAP is reported. I admit, I was never a big UFO ET buff growing up. I rarely gave it much thought, in fact, because I just knew within me, even when I was young, that other life forms existed everywhere and that humans were in no way the most evolved beings in the broad expanse of galaxies and universes beyond this realm. Because honestly, if we were as evolved as it gets, then I felt we're in trouble. And that was when I was young. With all the habitable planets in our little solar system alone, we're it? The top of the heap? Really? And when you consider the diversity of life on this planet alone, why would that diversity not exist throughout the multiverse? There's an ancient saying, maybe you've heard it, as above, so below. My interpretation of this is that there's nothing new under the sun. Everything in the higher realms has a counterpart in the lower realms. Everything going on in the higher realms is mirrored back in the lower realms. What is large is also small. It's simply a frequency thing because everything is frequency. When considering this, it would stand to reason in my mind that whatever we have living on this planet, from the cockroach to the dog or cat to the bipedal upright Homo sapiens sapien we call humans, has a counterpart in the multiverse because it all came from somewhere. It all originated from somewhere, and its origins could come from anywhere within an expansive and highly diverse multiverse. The theory of evolution is a complete fallacy. Genetic manipulation on this planet, however, is a scientific reality. Big difference. My first real immersion into the topic of galactic beings came in 2012 when my friend and fellow author Richard Andrew King asked me to edit and contribute the forward introduction to his book, The Galactic Transcripts. I saw the original hand-typed transcripts that were channeled in secret in 1959 through 1960 by high-ranking military personnel. And Richard personally knew the source who produced them and trusted the veracity of the transcripts since he trusted the source. I feel timelines have changed a lot since 1960 for a number of reasons, but that in no way diminishes the value of the information brought forth more than 60 years ago in these transcripts, for they opened my eyes to a greater understanding. I've put a link to this book in the description box below for those interested in reading the book. I later learned that one of the beings in the transcripts, a being by the name of Monka, had also been in contact with Sean David Morton, who wrote a series of books called The Sands of Time. Sean died in 2024 from throat cancer after being falsely imprisoned for a number of years. Regardless of how he's been judged, he was an outspoken advocate of disclosure and personal sovereignty, and his incarceration and subsequent passing were sadly a typical scenario for any whistleblower who dared to cross the MJ12 line, in my humble opinion. It's important to remember, too, that before this Aliens.gov website was initiated by the US government a few months ago, Donald Trump signed into existence in December of 2019 a new branch to the armed forces called the United States Space Force. Most in the UFO community are fully aware that this just made publicly official what had been operating in secret for many decades under the monogram SSP, or Secret Space Program, which means, in a nutshell, that our government has been traveling throughout space and among other civilizations for a very long time, and not with the embarrassing exploding rockets that NASA, Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos are distracting and insulting our intelligence with. And I include the Apollo missions in this as well. So let's look at these four alien species that Fox News is talking about. I've personally found that Hollywood has been used as a mass disclosure tool using predictive programming. Predictive programming is where they tell us through a cartoon or movie what's going to happen before it happens, as if setting the stage for the coming event, as if preparing the masses for what is to come under the guise of fiction. They tell us a lot in the movies. And it makes me ask, where do you think they get their ideas from? Out of the creative minds of the writers? Hardly. In fact, I knew one of the physicists who wrote some of the initial episodes for the X-Files television series in the early 1990s. They were not fiction. Out of the four on Fox's list of aliens, let's look at the gray alien first. Most of us are familiar with what a gray alien looks like because of the movies. We've been conditioned through decades of media and movies to accept the existence of gray aliens when considering movies like Steven Spielberg's E.T. from 1982 or even Paul from 2011. Of course, these are only a couple of examples. What these movies don't tell us is that the gray alien has a species name. Actually, it has a number of species names due to variations and types, such as short, smaller grays that are sometimes called Zeta reticuli, and the tall, larger grays that are called Maitre or Etorthin. Some of the species are human friendly, and some are extremely hostile. One size does not fit all here. And just like people you meet here on this planet, some people are good and some people are not. Some grays are non threatening, and some, like the Maitre and Etorthin, are considered extremely dangerous and anti human, contrary to what ufologist Stephen Greer says or tries to promote. Years ago, I was turned on to an old handbook. It was a Russian alien handbook, secretly used by its KGB as it accumulated information on the various species its agents had interacted with or knew about over the years. As interesting as it was, I've no doubt the list has expanded immensely since the handbook was made public. I don't know if it's still out there. The internet has been scrubbed of a lot of the material I researched 14, 15 years ago. And of course, anything electronic can be modified to fit a narrative anymore. So next, let's look at the insectoid beings referenced by Fox News in its report. Where have you seen insectoids in the movie? Ender's Game from 1985. Remember that one? And of course, the entire Sigourney Weaver Aliens movie series, to name a few. The Native American Hopis have their ant people legacy in hieroglyphics. And Simon Parkes, a former UK politician, openly discusses his connection to the mantis beings. For some, it may be a stretch to believe that upstanding bipedal insectoid beings with advanced consciousness exist. Yet, when we consider as above, so below, we can see that our planet's ant population and praying mantis varieties would be a direct reflection. And I only mentioned two types of insectoids here. There are many more to be sure. Okay, so let's look now at the reptilian beings referenced by Fox News in their report. Some call them lizards, some call them Dracos, some call them reptiles. To get a better understanding of what a Draco reptilian might look like, check out the 2015 movie Jupiter Ascending. I consider this movie a documentary at some level, for it tells us a lot more about what's really going on than it lets on. Another interesting movie showing reptilian shape-shifting traits would be the 1988 John Carpenter movie with Roddy Piper, the old wrestler Roddy Piper, called They Live. Roddy Piper had a fatal heart attack not long after coming out on Twitter to say the movie, They Live, was a documentary. And lastly are the Nordics, who are basically humanoid. Here's the problem with the Nordics. Many of them can look just like you and me. They could be walking among you and you'd never know it. And they have, and they are. They have stereotyped the Nordics as being blonde, blue-eyed, Scandinavian looking overall. And that would be correct, perhaps to a point, but extremely limiting. You know, my friend asked me the other day, if you had to produce a standard image representing planet Earth humans, including a man, a woman, and a child, what would they look like? I pondered on that for a second, and I realized I couldn't answer that question because there is no standard. Our diversity is too great. Why wouldn't it be the same for the Nordic humanoid? And just like humans here on Earth, some Nordics are considered good and some maybe not so good. This is where discretion and discernment come in, something we're all going to need in abundance as more and more information comes to the surface through the government's controlled soft disclosure. And when you consider the limitless diversity of galactic life is represented in the movie The Guardians of the Galaxy, for example, Star Wars, the bar scene in Star Wars, look at that, Star Trek, or even Jupiter Ascending, along with the testimony of people like Charles Hall about the tall whites in the Nevada desert, or the life experiences of Alex Collier and the Andromedans, we can see that there is so much that we don't know. We've been intentionally kept in the dark for close to a century, and it has limited our ability to perceive things beyond ourselves. It has been to our detriment. And guess what? Now, Mr. E.T. himself, Steven Spielberg, has just released his latest alien movie this month called what? Disclosure Day. All about the Greys. Yep, I'd say the disclosure agenda is in full swing. And I wonder if the agenda is to scare us into cooperating with something that would be to our further detriment. This disclosure agenda is already stirring up fear and resistance from religious camps because it somehow interferes with organized religion's stance on our human superiority. How many religious leaders have been quoted as saying aliens are demons? That's a pretty broad brush and would be akin to saying all humans are demons, when we know for a fact that most are not. Even the vice president, J.D. Vance, has stated publicly that he believes UFOs are demons rather than aliens. Again, a broad brushstroke rooted in fear here. If you consider the possibility that most religions we know of today have their roots in previous non human galactic occupation, then it would make sense that many religions would feel threatened at the prospect of ET removing their relevance. Just a thought. Just a thought. Lastly, I'd like to briefly touch on the pending ET light show many have been talking about for years, tied to a holographic weapon and project called Project Bluebeam. This is a planned holographic, real life looking light show in the sky that can make it look like we're being attacked or invaded by unknown aliens as a fear and control of the masses mechanism. We've seen these kinds of light shows done with drones, so we know it's possible. Please treat anything of this nature with skepticism and caution. Then ask yourself, can you trust the official narrative? Is it really the truth? And can we be invaded by something that's been here for eons? And let me say, just as a reminder, like most of the things I discuss on my channel, this topic is extremely multi-layered and multifaceted, which means that it's not just one thing that makes it all so. It's many layers of things over time that has gotten us to where we are today. What I'm trying to shed light on here are simply some of the significant factors, the lies, inconsistencies, and duplicities that I've observed when it comes to disclosure and the alien agenda. And I've managed to barely scratch the surface here. All said, in the end, I feel it's our responsibility to get educated, to learn as much as we can about our galactic neighbors with an open and non judgmental mind, and then let discernment prevail when it comes to interacting with those who aren't from this planet or our world. We should always use caution when dealing with someone we don't know anyway, regardless of where they hail from. This is just good old common sense. Question everything. Question it all. And then question it again. And then decide. So before I go, I'd like to leave you with a question to ponder, as I like to do. How do you feel about the introduction of non human beings into your reality? Please leave your comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, be well, choose love, and thank you. Thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.